Behind all the hype of Nano Banana Pro and Gemini 3, Google quietly launched the file search tool, which is available via the Gemini API. Now, this finally enables retrieval augmentation generation, otherwise known as RAG, for us non-developers. And why I'm so excited about this launch is that finally we can plug any of our internal documentation and knowledge base into our N8N workflow, which means that further downstream, any AI prompts we use are grounded in real data. So the benefits of this are a reduction in hallucinations, and essentially the AI has like a memory bank of our organization-specific SOPs, brand tone of voice, anything that's important to the company, the AI is now trained on that. So what does this mean specifically and how does it work? So the Gemini API file search tool essentially allows us to upload documents such as PDFs, CSVs. If you think about it, if you've got a 1,000-page PDF that contains everything to do with your organization, you can upload it into this store once. Google will index it once, and then we can reference it and query it as many times as we want at no extra cost. If we've got a site that is hundreds, if not thousands of URLs, and we wanted to use those URLs for internal links for our content, we can upload it once and then query it. The possibilities are endless with this. And what I'm going to show you today is one, how to create your file store. Number two, upload and import this data into your store. And then number three, how you can actually query it in your workflows. And one of the best use cases that I've got for this at the moment is I have this pretty beast content workflow, and I've added in this node here that essentially queries the two file search stores that I've set up for this workflow. So if I show you on the right-hand side here, and I scroll down, you can see on the right-hand side, it's queried one store, which is related to our SOPs, tone of voice, example documentation that contains an example content that I want the agent to write in the similar tone of. And then the other store down here is our SOP for actually writing the content. And what I can then do is bring those two stores together, bring that documentation together, and then feed that documentation into my writing expert here so that it has very strict guardrails on how the content should be produced. So super excited about this video today, and this is super simple to set up as well. You might have also caught it down at the bottom here, but this is incredibly cheap to run. So in the past, if you wanted to set something up like this, you'd have had to use a system like Pinecone. You would have had to get a developer involved, and to be honest, it would have got quite messy. Now, what happens is you get 1 million tokens for 15 cents, super cheap. And just to give you a bit of sense of the scale of that, if we were to upload a 50-page report, that would cost us 40,000 tokens. So barely 4% of the 15 cents that we would pay. And the only time we pay is when Google actually indexes these files. So this means that we can query it an unlimited amount of times. We're only paying for that initial index. So if we just upload the documentation and we never upload any more documentation, then we've only paid that fixed fee and there will be no additional fees. So super excited about this. If you want access to all three of these workflows, then click the link in the description, sign up to the form. You'll be sent a Notion board that looks a little bit like this. If you click the first link in the description, you will be able to download all of these workflows and quite simply go into your N8N instance, upload them, and you'll be good to go. So what I'm going to do is take you through how to set up the file store, upload the files into the Google Cloud, import them into your file store, and then query them in any given workflow. Super excited about this. Let's get into the video. Now, the first thing we need to do is set up our file store. Now, all the URLs that we require for all the nodes have been given in the sticky box above. But occasionally it is worth referencing the API documentation just so you can have a bit more understanding as to where these have come from and why those are the URLs. There might be times when you need to troubleshoot and things like that. So in the Notion board, I have also added a link to the API documentation. Now, if you're a little bit like me and some of this stuff goes over your head, what you can do is view it as Markdown. It will give you a format that looks like this. And this basically is a language that the LLMs can more easily read and understand. So if you're ever unsure, just copy and paste all of the Markdown, put it into ChatGPT and query the Markdown if you ever run into any issues. So to begin, to create the file search store, you need to create an HTTP request node. So if you press the plus button up here, press HTTP request and select it. You'll get something that looks a little bit like this. Now I'll show you the one that we've already created. So the method needs to be post. The URL is v1beta/file search stores with the both S's capitalized. Again, I have given the URL up at the top here, so you quite simply just need to copy and paste this into your node. If you scroll down, select send body. We're going to be sending a JSON file. And then down here, we just need to create a name for this. So I'm going to call this session media docs, something like that. Now, one thing I've just glossed over a little bit is when you create a credential, you must use the same credential across all three workflows. So you must use the same credential when you're uploading the file to the cloud, when you're importing it into your store, and then when you're querying that data. Otherwise, you'll get a 403 forbidden message. So to create a credential, you need to create an API key in Google Cloud Console. So there's sort of two ways you can do this. So if you come down to create a new credential, you'll be asked for a host and API key down at the bottom here. If you head into aistudio.google.com on the homepage, down in the bottom left-hand side, select Get API Key and then Create API Key. Now, if you've already got a cloud project, then you can quite simply just create one of your projects. Otherwise, select Create Project, give it a name, and then you will be good to get started. The other way that you can create a project in Google Cloud, and the more sort of traditional route to do this, is if you Google Cloud Console, start at the top here. This way is a little bit longer, I'll be honest. Up at the top, select this and create a new project. If you then select the hamburger, come down the left-hand side, go to credentials, and you can essentially create an API through this system as well. But the Google AI Studio is the much quicker way to do it these days. So get your API key from Google's AI Studio. So once you have your API key, you quite simply need to create the credential. The host is generativelanguage.googleapis.com. In fact, I think it makes a lot of sense to add that in here, doesn't it? So make sure that that's plugged in, and then give your documentation a name, and then quite simply select execute step. And then what you'll notice on the right-hand side is you'll get an ID that looks a little bit like this. So it will follow file search stores / and then it will give you an ID. And this is absolutely critical that you keep hold of it. So copy it and store it in your notes somewhere. Once we've created our store, we then need to upload documentation to our store. So before I started this video, what I did was I took an example blog from Session Media. I then downloaded it as a PDF. I then crawled our website and got a list of URLs with target keywords for each of those URLs, and those are going to make up our internal links. And what I'm going to do is upload this CSV and this PDF to the store. So if I head into step 2, what I've done is create a very simple form submission node. And you can do this by going to plus, N8N form, on new form event. Get rid of my face down here. I'm just going to call this file. You don't need an authentication. Add form element. I'm going to call this file. This is going to be a file upload. And then what this allows us to do is upload multiple files in one go to the system. So I've already created one. I'm going to get rid of this one here. That looks a little bit like this. So as I've said, I've just called it file, just called the field name file. It doesn't really matter too much, to be totally honest with you. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to break this away for the time being, just so I can show you how it works. Now, if I select execute workflow, it's going to ask me to drop in my files. So what I'm going to do is upload those 2 files into my form and hit submit, and we can see that that's successful. Now, because I've got multiple files, I have added a split node in because we need each of these to be listed as individual entities and not as an array. So what we first need to do is upload it to the cloud. So what this does is it puts it into some temporary storage, but we haven't yet moved it into our file search store. So what you then need to do to create this is it's another HTTP request. So just like the last one that we created, looks a little bit like that. It's going to be another post node. And then I've, again, given you the upload URL here. So you're just going to add this in. You're going to send body, and then I've given you the JSON in the existing workflow. So again, if I go to the one that I've already created, JSON using fields below, and then we're literally just putting the file name. So make sure the name is file name as it's referenced here. And then I've literally just dragged this over here. And then what it does is it looks for both of these file names. Now what I'm going to do is execute this step, and this will upload it into the cloud temporarily. And you can tell it's temporary because there's an expiration time here. So if we don't subsequently import it into our file store, then these files will expire and they will no longer exist in the cloud. So once we've uploaded it, we then need to import it. So again, this is another HTTP request node. This is another post as well. Now, what we need to do is actually put the store name into the URL here, and then we need to tell it to import. So what I'm going to do is go back to our first step. I'm going to copy the name from that first step, and I'm going to go to import URL. And what I'm going to do, because I know that the file search store comes with the ID, is just paste this. This all looks okay. And just make sure, yeah, we've got the colon file import. So it should look a little bit like that. Again, we're going to send body. And we're, again, just pushing the same file name. So the parameters are the same as they were in the upload node. Again, make sure the credential type is the exact same that we've used in that step one. Otherwise, this will fail. You'll get a forbidden message basically. So I'm now going to connect this. I'm going to open it up, and we should see this turn green because it recognizes the files. Now what I'm going to do is execute this step. And what we should see is the data. Firstly, we'll get a node executed successfully, but you should see data on the right-hand side. And then we'll see the files have been uploaded, and they've been broken down into these IDs that sit that look a little bit like this, and the types that also look like this. So now we've moved both of our files. So our example content piece that we want the output to look like. So I'm going to plug this into a content workflow, and I want the workflow to at least sort of mimic the structure of that example piece, you know, in respect of like tone and sentence lengths and things like that. I've also added a list of website URLs that we can use for internal links. That's step one and step two done. The final step is actually using it live in a workflow. And what I've done is I've just given you a single node here that you'll need to copy and paste into your desired workflow. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So again, open it up. We've got a post URL here. Now the URL, I've realized I haven't actually added into a sticky note, but I will do it right now. So the URL is not that. The URL as I've given in this node is here. Now, two sort of things to bear in mind with this. You will see in the API documentation, and let me just actually give you a brief sort of overview of where we've pulled those URLs for. So you can see create a file search store, file search stores. That's our first URL. We only need to use this key if we haven't used a credential, but we've used a credential throughout. We've then got the upload to store. We can see that the URL is down here. Well, this is sort of one way in which we can do it. And again, it's asked us for a key. And then the final part is the import, which sits a little bit further down the page here. And you can see that this is the URL that we've used. So if you ever run into issues with the URL for whatever reason, you can find them in the API documentation. Now, if I keep scrolling down here, you'll see down at the bottom that the supported models are the Gemini models. So Gemini 2.5 all the way up to Gemini 3. Now, what's important to note is that Gemini can pull or at least query the data, I should say, if I'm using correct terminology. It can query the file data, but it can then move it into an AI agent that doesn't need to use Gemini. And I'll show an example of that in my workflow just after this. So how do we create this node here? How do we pull the content? Again, it's a post request. It's another HTTP request, sorry. So again, as we've already done, an HTTP request, the method again is post. Once more, make sure you're using the same credentials as prior to that. And then the JSON has quite a specific format. So there's two parts to this. The first part is telling it what data to retrieve. The second part is telling it where to retrieve the data from. So this is quite simply the store name. And what I'm going to do is show an example of where I've plugged this into a workflow. Now, you can put this into pretty much any one of your N8N workflows. So you could have created a sales agent, an outreach assistant. In my example, I've built a content creation workflow. So I want the output to mimic the tone of the example content that I gave it in the PDF, and I want it to use the internal links from the list that I've given it. So this is the content workflow that I built. Here is where I put the node. So I put the node just before my writing agent. I have done a video on building this workflow, but since I've added to it, evolved it, and it's a bit of a super agent for us now. We still have a copy editor that goes through it, checks the facts, really ties it up, and makes sure that it's super aligned to the client. So always use someone at the end of the process. But how the query node works, how the file search retrieval node works, again, if I jump straight into this, we're using the same credential, right? So this same client brain Gemini API that we've used in step 1, 2, and 3, make sure that we're using it when querying the data. If I scroll down and I open up the JSON I've given, now what you'll notice is that I've got 2 stores that I'm querying. So one of the stores is a client store that we've built for our clients using publicly available information on their website and things like that. The other store that we've created is our SOPs. So naturally, over the years, we've evolved our SOPs on how to do various things in the SEO landscape, such as writing content, optimizing content, briefs, pretty much everything under the sun, right? So what we can do is pull the client documentation from one store. We can then pull our SOP documentation from another store, combine this into a couple of lines of text that we can then push into our writing assistant to create the content with the context. So you can see on the right-hand side here, I've got my client ID. I probably will blur this out, but then I've got my SEO SOP. So this is a content workflow, as I've said. So if I move this over on the right-hand side, I can already see that it's pulled the framework from our content SOP, which is great. So it gives me confidence that it's looking at the right thing in the right place. And then here is my SOP, my SEO SOP store. So I can see that both of these stores have been referenced, which is awesome. And now in my writing expert, what I can subsequently do is I can tell it to look specifically at the data that has been pulled by the file search store and then feed it in to the output that it's going to create. We can now get output that is vastly better. I'm talking sort of 9 or 10x better than the previous output we were getting. I've used this in the example of creating a piece of content, but realistically, you can drop this node into pretty much any N8N workflow where you need to reference SOPs, documentation, internal client documentation, company documentation, things like that. And it gives the AI those additional guardrails. And I must say the output is absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm sure it's not absolutely perfect. So I said, I'm not a developer, right? So I can't compare this to a Supabase vector database or Pinecone or something like that. But I can tell even from an eyeball test, when I check the humanization, when I check the scores on Surfer, that the output is infinitely better. The setup takes a few minutes. So I'm super excited by this, and I was super excited to take you guys through this. If you've stuck to the end, you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. Give me a comment. Tell me what you think about the file search tool. I'll be really, really interested in that. Alternatively, if you're looking for AI, SEO, or SEO services going into the new year, then do jump onto sessionmedia.com, click the proposal, fill in the contact form, and we'll be in touch. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next video.